time for complaints about the power rankings. I'm going to give you the opportunity to tell me how crazy you think I am. And again, please respect the process of me pulling them out of my butt. I know I made a mistake, Falcons fans. The Eagles should be 13 and the Falcons should be 12. I know this. I screwed that up. I admit it. I freely acknowledge it. Other than that, what do you think about my top 16?
Well, I mean, you want to talk about pulling them out of your butt, but then last week, you go to the PFT text chain and it's all, should I put the Bills number one? Should I really make them number one over the Chiefs?
Those are off the record. You're violating the protocol.
Yeah.
I've already spoken about it publicly. I'm just kidding.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, my argument last week, which at first you're like, you're being obstinate because you don't want to say. I'm like, okay, fine. It's not the Bills that should be number one. It's not the Chiefs that should be number one. It's the Vikings that should be number one, frankly. And I still think that this week, who's been playing better football than the Minnesota Vikings through the first 4 weeks of the season? It ain't the Chiefs. I mean, I'll hear the argument about the Lions, but they kind of peed down their leg a little bit when they played the Buccaneers, who are a really good team as well. But I'm serious. Like, when you look at what the Vikings have done over the first 4 weeks, okay, you beat the Giants, whatever, but you're on the road. It's week one. You don't necessarily know what can happen. Then you play the San Francisco 49ers, you beat them. You play the Houston Texans, you beat them. You go to Lambeau Field, and yeah, things got a little wonky at the end, but you beat them too, and that's a division rival. I mean, these are all teams that won a playoff game last year. Nobody's playing better football than the Minnesota Vikings. They should be number one. And I'm surprised that you, of all people, don't have them there.
I did not accuse you of being obstinate last week. I just want the record to be clear. I accused you of being obtuse because I was asking a direct question, and you were giving me this roundabout. You should get your OB words straight. Did you have an OBGYN in the family?
I do.
You should know all the OB words, forward and backward. I was calling you obtuse. So you did make the argument last week that the Vikings should be number one. I just still feel like I need to see more. It feels fluky. It feels a little fugazi. And I think it goes back to, and I remember we were sitting in the press box at Allegiant Stadium when we were processing all of the Sunday Super Bowl splash reports, and one of them came from, I think, NFL Media or ESPN, that if Kirk Cousins leaves, the Vikings might turn to Sam Darnold. And I felt physically ill. And it's just a product. It's a product of the Jets ruining him. We talked about this yesterday with Michael Hawley. The idea that we stigmatize quarterbacks because they get ruined by a team, and it's nothing personal to them. Their name just gets associated with not good quarterback play. And is that why, please psychoanalyze me, is that why I'm holding back the Vikings?
I think that's part of it. I mean, listen, I think that it's almost like, how do we define power rankings, right? I mean, is it what we've seen or what we've seen versus what we think we'll continue to see? Because if it's the latter, then I guess I get where you're coming from. And frankly, I also get where you're coming from with Sam Darnold. I mean, I've lived in Los Angeles for, practically a decade at this point. And so I watched Sam Darnold at USC. And it's not like, we can talk about the Jets ruining him and all that, and some of that is true. But Sam Darnold had turnover problems when he was a quarterback at the University of Southern California. So, like, those things don't just necessarily go away. Now, he had a couple turnovers in that game against the Packers. One of them shouldn't have actually been one, so I will give him credit for that. But I understand your reluctance to say I'm all in on Sam Darnold, right? I mean, the Vikings certainly didn't do that when they went out and they got J.J. McCarthy, and their entire plan was to have J.J. McCarthy ready himself behind Sam Darnold. And, you would think that at some point over the course of the year, he would have been ready to take over for Sam Darnold. So this is not, what the plan was. And you also can look at last year with what Kevin O'Connell did with the Pastronaut, with Josh Dobbs, right? Those first few weeks, my gosh, it was a house of fire. And then people started figuring out, okay, this is what Josh Dobbs does well, and this is what we need to start taking away. And then they ended up having to play Nick Mullins. So yeah, there is an element of this could fall off a cliff for Sam Darnold. However, I think with the way that the defense is played, and again, they've beaten quality opponents, like there's nobody playing better football right now in general in my mind than the Minnesota Vikings.
The thing that impresses me the most in 2 of their wins, and they've beaten 3 teams that were in the final 8 last year. Yeah. When you looked at the early season Vikings schedule, I was thinking 1-3, maybe 2-2 if they're lucky. They've gone 4-0, and they've beaten 3 teams that made it all the way to the divisional round. And 2 of those games, against the 49ers and then against the Packers, they had big leads that they tried to squander, got to the point where the momentum was squarely on the side of the final 8 team from a year ago that knows a thing or two about winning, and Sam Darnold led a scoring drive, field goal in each case, but it was enough to slam the door. It took a 1-score game, turned it into a 2-score game, and that was that. That's what impresses me the most. When you got to re-access that thing that caused you to build the lead that you blew. Because once that starts to go, it's hard to flip the switch back. Look at what happened to the Eagles when it all fell apart against the Falcons. It's hard to get it back. That's what impresses me. They got it back with him leading the way offensively. When you have Justin Jefferson, it helps. And when you throw it to him as much as you can, it helps too. But they did it twice. That's the one thing that makes me say, maybe this is sustainable.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there. But like I said, it's not just, oh, you've been able to turn it on. I mean, it's that they've been able to get out to these things and they've beaten the teams that are quality opponents. And the way that they've done it, I think, is more sustainable because of the talent that they have, right? You get TJ Hawkinson back, that's another weapon that they're going to be able to implement and use and then have that going forward. So there are a lot of things and a lot of elements that I really like about the Vikings right now. And so I get Chiefs number 1. Yes. Understand that they are still the defending champions. They've got a lot of issues now on offense because of all the injuries that they've had. But as long as you got 1-5, you're going to have a chance to be great. And Lions number 2, I mean, that makes sense to me as well. That is a really good, really, really good team, and they have the aspirations that they have for a reason. But again, I mean, I think that if we're saying who is playing the best football right now, and that's how we do power rankings, then that to me is why the Vikings would be number 1.
I see your point. I think I still give some deference to the fact that the Chiefs are the defending champions, 2-time defending champions, although it caused me last week to put the Bills above them because the Bills look so damn good through the first 3 weeks. Then they get blown out, sir, by the Ravens, get blown out. I dropped them all the way to 5. Who's the biggest threat right now in the AFC to the Chiefs? Or there may be more than one. Well, give me 1A and 1B or 1 and 2, top 2 teams that could maybe dethrone the Chiefs when the time comes to go single elimination.
I mean, I would say the Bills, right? I mean, they play close playoff games, those 2 teams. At least they have the last couple times that they've met, in 2021 postseason and last year. I mean, the Texans also come to mind for me just because of what we've seen CJ Stroud do. And I think that, going into the postseason in a second year, he's going to be that much better. But those are the 2 that I guess I would say. The issue with the Bills is that they can be a juggernaut and they can just smash you. Or things can happen like they did on Sunday night where it's, oh my gosh, like they are really just attacking us, and our second level, our intermediate defenders with the linebackers, because we know that they've got injury issues there. And boy, that's a little bit overwhelming. So that's where, yes, Josh Allen is playing great football. And when he's playing as well as he is, that obviously makes them a threat. But I don't know. I mean, I picked the Chiefs to win 3 in a row. So I'm not going to back off of that going into week 5.
I'm still perplexed by Josh Allen saying after that game on Sunday night that the Bills didn't have the urgency. They're going in to face a Ravens team that desperately needed to avoid falling to 1 and 3. How do you not have urgency for that one? And that speaks to a deeper flaw that they got to get ironed out soon, or they're going to have a hard time. I don't want to say getting to the playoffs because I think they're the best team in that division, as evidenced by the fact that the Jets are going to be up and down, hovering around 500. But they need something more than that if they're going to play with the best of the best. All right, the Commanders have shown us plenty the first 4 weeks of the season, 3-1. They're in the top 10. I moved them from 15 to 9. Should they be the betting favorite, if we care about such things, in the NFC East right now?
Well, I mean, if you care about such things, then you don't want them to be the favorite, so you can put your money on them, and then when they win, you'll get more money. Because I mean, I don't necessarily see how they're not going to win the NFC East if they keep playing at this level. Now, are they going to continue playing at this level? Who knows? But what I think we got to give Dan Quinn credit for is establishing a staff around Jayden Daniels that actually is cohesive and works. Because, Mike, I was thinking about this. Remember last year when, they hired Frank Reich, the way you pronounce that, with the Carolina Panthers, and it was, oh my gosh,
there's only one person,
all-star staff.
There's only one person in the world that pronounces it wrong, and he did it the day after he fired him. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yes. But yeah. Anyway, they established this all-star staff, and it's like, oh my gosh, they're going to have so much support for Bryce Young. But what they did was they created a Frankenstein scheme between Reich and Thomas Brown that did not work, right? But what you have with the Washington Commanders is, an offensive coordinator in Cliff Kingsbury. You've got Anthony Lynn, who is the run game coordinator. You got Brian Johnson as the pass game coordinator. You've got Pritchard as their quarterbacks coach, who was there before, and he stayed on. Right. And then you've got David Blau, who I did not realize retired, but he's their assistant quarterbacks coach. But Dan Quinn was kind of talking about this earlier this week, and that's kind of what made my wheel spin on it. All of those people have created a scheme that works for Jayden Daniels and works for everybody. Right. And that, to me, is one of the most important things you can do to set up your young quarterback for success. It's not just, oh my gosh, there's so many minds. It's how do those minds work together? And I got to give Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury a lot of credit for setting Jayden Daniels up for success.
I've already got Bears fans clamoring for Cliff Kingsbury to be the next head coach in Chicago, and that is the big concern. When you have a defensive head coach with a great young quarterback, you're going to lose your offensive coordinator sooner or later, and you better have somebody ready to go to step in and continue that, because that's your most important relationship, franchise quarterback and the person who's talking to him all the time. And all due respect to the great defensive head coaches out there, if I own a team, and fans of whatever team I might own should be happy I don't, the one thing I would want is joined at the hip, Drew Brees, Sean Payton type of a relationship where I know the head coach isn't going anywhere and the quarterback isn't going anywhere for as long as the quarterback is still able to play at a high level in the NFL. All right, let's look at the other side. The Jaguars at number 32, although the Panthers doing their best to get back to the bottom spot. Do you see the first win? Do you envision a victory looming for the Jaguars, given the fact that on top of losing their first 4 games, they're also starting to give off strong fumes of dysfunction?
I think that they can win this week against the Colts, given what we don't necessarily know about Anthony Richardson's situation. But if they don't win this week, I think they'll win next week in London, playing the Bears. When you go over to London, it is weird and it's different. And I think for especially your rookie quarterback who is still trying to acclimate himself, get himself comfortable in the scheme, get himself comfortable with the receivers and Caleb Williams, that aspect of going over to London, especially against a team that does it every year, is going to be a little bit more difficult than, it would typically be. So if it's not this week against the Colts and a division rival, then I think it'll be next week. Is that going to be enough to save Doug Peterson's job? I don't know about all that.
Well, they have a later bye. They don't have a bye when they get back from London, when they do the 2 games there. They have the Packers at home right away. I think if they lose the next 2, the Patriots game, the second game of the 2-pack in London, one at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium and one at Wembley, that Patriots game becomes absolute positive must-win. They fall to 0-7. Yeah. And I don't have a clear and obvious interim coach on the staff. I'd say Mike McCoy, because he was a head coach of the Chargers after he was offensive coordinator of the Broncos in their heyday, which is getting deeper and deeper into the rearview mirror. But I feel like lose the next 3 and it's done. And I just thought it was odd that Doug Peterson acted surprised that anyone would even ask him about his status. When you look at the check that Shad Khan wrote before the season, greatest Jaguars team ever assembled, and it's a check that he wrote on Peterson's account, and it's bouncing. So he's the guy who gets bounced at some point. And I think they lose the next 3, and I think that's it.
Right, and Shad Khan was reportedly very, very upset, not even last week, but the week before last when they lost. So, I mean, this is something where now it's the tension is there. So that's why it's kind of surprising that you'd say you're surprised that you got asked, right? Because if there is a report about the owner being upset, like very upset with the loss, then you're going to get told about it, whether it is from the owner himself or from the PR staff that preps you for your press conferences. So he knew that that was some sort of dynamic. You can't convince me that he didn't know. So maybe he is trying to play it off by saying, oh, I'm surprised, or not. I don't know, but that's something that it's now going to continue to be a story as long as the Jaguars continue to lose.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.